Hey everybody, time for another moment of science. Today, we are going to be working with friction. We're going to be testing friction to see what actually affects it. So today's hypothesis question, uh, what factors affect the frictional force between two objects or two surfaces? Is it volume, mass, weight, density, surface area, type of surface? What is it? Okay. So pause the video and write your hypothesis as an if-then statement, remember. So you could write it this way. If we want to change the amount of friction between two objects, then we would change these things. Okay. So pause the video, write your hypothesis, and then we'll get started. You'll notice that this block of wood has different things on different sides. I have a large side with some black material, a small side with some black material on it, a large side with no material on it, just the normal wood, and a small side with just wood, no material, no covering on it. And so we're going to be testing all four of those sides to see which side of the block has more friction on it when I slide it across the surface of the table. So what we're going to use to test that is our handy dandy spring scale. It's going to measure the amount of newtons that it is required to move the block. Because the more friction, the more uh, newtons it takes, the more friction there is on the block. Again, I'm pretty new to creating these videos, so if you see me pause in my motion or in my speaking, just know that I'm learning just along with you on how to do this stuff. Okay, so I'm going to be hooking this spring scale up to the hook that's already on the block. And then I'm going to pull the block along to see how much force it takes to move the block. Now, the block's very light, so I'm going to add this textbook, this wonderful physics textbook, to the top of the book so that it is harder to pull. Okay, so I'm going to hook it up, and we are going to test to see how much force it takes to pull this block. We're going to try the large covered side first. You'll notice that the large covered side is the one on the bottom, and we're going to pull to see how much force is there. So you'll see, I'm going to do this 3 times for each side of the block, and then I'm going to calculate an average of those 3 sides. Just like every good experiment, you're going to try to do things more than once. The more data you have, the better information you have to share with other people about the topic that you're working with. Okay, so since we're doing friction, I'm going to slide this block 3 times, and then I'm going to write down after each trial how much force it took to pull it. I will be putting this information on the screen so that you can see that information after I'm done with each side of the block. So after 3 pulls, this is the information you need for the large covered side. Record that information somewhere around you in your own notebook so that you can have the data later for when you're answering the questions. Speaking of the questions that you could be answering right now, pause for a second and answer the question about what type of friction does this block of wood and the table have? Think about that. What kind of friction does it have as it's going across the table? All right, I'm going to flip over this block and I'm going to use the large uncovered side now. And I'm going to continue to do the same thing. I'm going to pull it. I'm going to keep the book on top because we need to keep the same weight every time. Otherwise, we're going to test weight 2, which is not what we're doing right now. Okay, so trial 1 for the large uncovered side. Trial number 2. Trial number 3. And this is the information you need for the large uncovered side. Record this information as you did with the last one, so that you can have this information to compare to. Okay, you'll notice that the information is different for each side, and you'll be able to tell me why later. Okay? So the next side we're going to do is the narrow or the small covered side. Again, I'm going to put my book back on top. We've got to keep that the same and limit the amount of variables that we are testing. And then we're going to pull it once. Okay. We're going to pull it again. And we're going to pull it one more time. Right. I'm going to find the average of that one too. And here's the information you need for the large or the narrow covered side. Record that in your notebook. And then finally, we are going to do the narrow or the small uncovered side. We're going to do this one 3 times as well. We got to keep everything equal. We're going to put the book back on, keeping that equal, and we're going to pull. Pull again. We're going to pull one more time. Now, that is the finish of the experiment. Here is the data for the small uncovered side of the block. Record that information. Now pause the video and answer the question, what 2 things did we just test about friction? What 2 things did we test that can affect friction? Okay. It's in the list I mentioned. Both of them are in the list I mentioned with the hypothesis. Okay. So give it a shot, take it a look, and then come back. Now you have all the information you need to answer the conclusion questions. You have all the information you need to answer the questions about what affects friction, and what types of friction you'll see. After you're done with the conclusion questions, I've given you a challenge. I want you to test friction at home or wherever you are. I want you to come up with a test that will test something else that can affect friction. I want you to write down your procedure, the steps that you took to test. I want you to give me some kind of data proving what you came up with. And I want a good conclusion. Did that factor actually affect friction or not? Thanks everybody for joining me for another moment of science. Have a great day.